I'm going to start off by talking to you about social media, maybe in a way that's different than most of your speakers today, because I think you can't differentiate social from oxygen anymore. I'd be very surprised if when I log back on after I finish talking to you for 35 or 40 minutes, if I don't see a smattering of tweets, a number of postings where people agree or disagree with what I'm saying. Because what's going on today is we've all become completely addicted to constant communications. And I say addicted because our lives have become completely commingled with our new social lives. And these social lives mean we're living concurrent, parallel universe lifestyles. So that this is talking, and many of us have BlackBerry neck, leaning down all day long. Many of us are having 3 conversations at once. The conversation we're having face-to-face, the conversation we're having on text, and the conversation we're having on ICQ or on Facebook chat or via direct tweet. And to us, that's really just the beginning of what's happening in our world. These changes are all completely here to stay, and they're reinventing every conceivable industry. And anybody who's not part of reinvention is part of obsolescence. It's changing where you can work. It makes an office a somewhat redundant entity. Real estate profession is very much in the throes of understanding that people can be competitive and productive from any place at any time. And in fact, the working day is counterproductive because many people are up online, socially linked in at the hours when they are most productive. And in fact, the working day was really conceived for farmers, and none of us in this room are agrarian, and none of us are earning our living from crops. And as a consequence, the social economy is a 24/7, 365 economy. And we need to figure out when we need to be tuned in and turned on in order to be a productive component of it. SOMI is constantly transforming. There's a few words I'm going to ask you to take away today. One is this phrase, SOMI. And I asked you to take away in two formats. SOMI meaning the shorthand for social media, and SOMI because it is such a selfish lifestyle. Everything is all about you. You're online, you're tweeting, you're making a Facebook status update. The world does not care if you're walking the dog. They don't care if you're blow drying your hair. They don't care that you just couponed at the supermarket and saved, 50 cents or 10% on ears of corn. And yet it's very important to you, and we're living our lives in the public domain now. And this is part of being part of the SOMI world. I'm going to take you through 16 shifts that I'm observing, each of which have, I think, real business implications. The first is that everywhere you are, somebody can hear you, and you want to be heard, and everybody wants to be heard. SOMI really knows no limits from the ends of the earth. People really just want to be heard. They want to be turned on and tuned in at all times, with the exception of a few luxury resorts where we pay an extraordinary premium to go SOMI free. So on one level we'll pay extreme rates to be able to be places where there is no media available. But in fact, climbers on Mount Everest can actually now get cell service, and I'm working on 3 pieces of pharma business where there are extreme athletes who are looking for sponsorship, who are going to be going up there with chronic conditions and are looking for pharma grants who are going to sponsor them to continuously communicate about their treatments from those locations. But there you are in Nepal, and you're no longer remote at all. You're simply a tweet, status update, a blog posting away. Location sharing services, including Foursquare, have actually gone 220 miles out into the ozone with NASA, with the astronauts, and really been able to do a check-in. So outer space is now part of inner space, and it's only a SOMI away. The next is the idea about high-end Wi-Fi, but it's just that it's got to be part of, again, the oxygen. If you can't be connected, you just feel like you're out of touch. And we actually start to feel like we're in detox. I mean, I don't know how many of you start to tremble if you can't get to your phone. And by the way, I am not going to tell you to put your phones away. If you feel like you need to check them, pull them out. Because in this brave new Sony world, it would be unfair to ask people to not look at their BlackBerries and not look at their iPhones. In fact, it would be like asking an alcoholic not to have a drink. It would just be unfair. So please do look at your phones, do what you need to do. Anything less than that would just be not appropriate for these times. But what we're hearing is that young people need this Wi-Fi so desperately that they feel that when they're not on Wi-Fi, they're not really alive. They feel less than alive. And I don't know how many of you have teenagers in your home, but I know at my house, one of the big problems are we sit down at the dinner table and they're actually texting each other across the table. And that seems to me to be like a little bit ridiculous. You'll say, well, can you put it away? But then we'll go down and say, well, people can't find me. And I'm saying that it really only takes 10 minutes to finish dinner. No, but people can't find me. But we are absolutely looking at a world where more and more mobility, they need constant connectivity. They need constant connectivity in terms of speed. So we saw that 2/3 of US and 4/5 of Chinese actually are spending more time on Wi-Fi than on TV. And they like to watch their video product through Wi-Fi devices, which may actually explain why the iPad has the fastest adoption rate of any tech device ever. But this idea that as you're creating media product for this generation, I'm going to say is 16 to 29 years old, forget about the big screen. Think about the fast screen. Think about how you're going to deliver it to them in real time and constantly allow them to modify, co-create it, share it, comment upon it, and then move on to the next episode of it. There's a reason Lost was so popular. Episodically, it kept delivering more and more and more. A large number of those surveyed said that it would be difficult to maintain most of their friendships without Wi-Fi. In fact, they probably wouldn't want to. It wouldn't be worth it to them. Millennials around the world are the most connected generation, and they've grown up fluent in social media. In fact, they don't understand why the rest of us don't enjoy video roulette. If none of you have played video roulette, it means you're not modern. Because I can assure you your children are playing it at home, and you're not going to like what I'm going to tell you. Video roulette means that they're logging on, and they're doing funny tricks for people of all ages anywhere in the world, and then they just click delete and move on to the next one if they don't like what they're seeing on the other side. It's uncensored, unfiltered, unidentifiable. It's people of all ages doing everything from playing strip poker to telling dirty jokes to doing wrestling, and it is the wildest, hottest new thing. It is the Match.com for the 14 to 20-year-old set. So if you're playing beer pong at home, and I don't care if you're in Germany or you're in the Philippines or you're in the US, you're much more excited to be doing it with people all around the world. And this is the hot new thing that people are doing in the evenings. Okay, so for the young at heart, another thing really is that it's got to be social if it's going to be promotional. A marketeer cannot reach you unless there's a social component, unless you can share it with a friend. And that also includes if you're going to shop online. I'm going to say that we now date products before we go out with them. We won't buy something if we can't date it, particularly if it's a fashion item or a cosmetics item. We want to be able to send it to a friend and get their feedback. And this really begins to add up to something that's got to be very, very social. So if you look at who's been successful at it, think about what Honda has done in Europe for the CRZ hybrid, with the crowdsourced documentary, or many of the brands in China that have had real success with branded viral videos that get passed along and ultimately modified, or how Ferrero has been able to go mobile, and Toyota has done it in the US. MTV is doing it in India. But another big thing is local is the new global, and that means very, very hyper-local. So you're seeing a brand like American Eagle go down to the university dorm level. They're doing special custom promotions by specific dorm buildings. And you're seeing a lot of very, very hyper-local promotions suddenly take off, where it's going down to that geo-local device as a way to kick in. The other thing you're seeing is service really having to kick up, but the social tools being Big Brother. So if we thought Big Brother didn't exist and we thought we had privacy, privacy is a mirage, and I know in Germany it's a very, very political thing to say, but there is no such thing as privacy. And perhaps the WikiLeaks is going to reinforce that. I know that we like to believe there's privacy, but there just isn't. So here you have the travel industry really needs to adjust what it's thinking, but Sony is really stepping in. So here, travel-related businesses are using TripAdvisor for what they claim is to really get rid of libelous comments that people were making about different airlines, about different hotel venues. And now hotels are actually keeping a list of bad customers, people who weren't good customers, people they didn't enjoy having in their hotels on sites like Guest Checker. So that basically they're saying they don't want you to come back and other hotels shouldn't check you in. And these kinds of sites are cropping up so that small businesses and medium-sized businesses don't have the same kind of extreme situation. So more and more sources are looking for guidelines on how to provide social media to improve customer service, while some are smartly advising people on how to get involved with and how to handle bad reviews. But the business of reviews and comments is, I think, going to be an extreme situation that all of us as business people are going to have to learn to handle. So, Facebook. I think as we saw with the Globe Awards last night, the movie has reinforced the business, which reinforces, here's somebody who's created a nation that's bigger than most nations in the world. But it's constantly changing and it's always looking for ways to improve. So Facebook has really evolved as a platform and it's become altered. And while it was once something that was really for American Ivy League kids to hook up, either to hook up for sex or to hook up for couches to sleep on as they traveled city to city, it's become something entirely different now. It's both a place to store your diary, it's a place to update your social life, it's a place for brands to begin to liaise with you on an hourly basis. It's really now also a place where people of all generations are logging on and trying to figure out how to be there and be part of many, many different secular communities. I think for Facebookers, there's a huge opportunity to figure out how to create multiple niches, because otherwise it's going to run the risk of becoming the largest mass market in history. Twitter has an extraordinarily interesting role now in the world of criminality and justice. Law enforcement is using it in some very, very interesting and exciting ways. It's becoming the place to be if you're a journalist tracking what's happening in a courtroom, but it's also being really, really integrated into law enforcement. People are reporting incidents they see. It's becoming the place to go on if you're a buff for crime television. People are starting to follow all kinds of crime reporting online, and crime media is one of those areas that we're seeing a lot of interested people rising to follow up on it. We're also seeing more and more interest in all the ways these services are being called into courtrooms, so that people are being trained to both track perps this way and to follow up and actually have them be arrested this way. You're also seeing coverage of trials happen via Twitter. You saw this with a horrible home invasion case in the U.S. most recently, where literally the New York Times was picking up on the coverage that was being flooded in through Twitter. You're seeing people start to take big interest in upgrading their own professional credentials using services like LinkedIn, but more and more people getting on and managing their own brand using these online services. So as the job market's gotten bleaker and bleaker, people taking more and more interest in managing who they are and their own brand as well as their commercial brands using these online services. And more people cleaning up cyber personas, inventing cyber personas, developing so many profiles in order to work around who they think they should be. You're seeing new devices come out so that there can be no drunk posting. You're seeing new devices come out that help you monitor what other people are posting about yourself. You're seeing too, new guidelines come about so that social networking can't happen in the workplace in some countries. India has the tightest guidelines for corporations that are not letting employees get online in the office. In contrast, in the US, in various companies, the number may be as high as 2 hours a day are being lost to social media sites. So it's a real extreme. But you're seeing that India is also a place where there basically is just beginning to be a ramp onto the information superhighway in terms of social usage. And as a consequence, you're seeing more and more interest in that market in terms of what can be done. More restrictions are going to be developed. More companies are going to need to develop guidelines, constant revisions as to what the guidelines are. For any of you in the pharma space, the U.S. Government is still holding back on issuing its guidelines about pharma marketing, and as a consequence, every pharma company is being forced to develop its own guidelines, which will then have to be revised when the government comes back. Right now, there are only about 100 Indian brands on Facebook. In contrast, there are thousands and thousands of brands from other Asian countries. So what you're going to end up seeing is this great race to be part of the Facebook world, and it's going to be a multicultural, multi-race, multi-country place. And if you're not going to be there and be there early and develop interesting tools and techniques for being there, it's going to be a pretty boring space to be, because you're just going to get lost in the clutter. So what are brands going to be able to do in order to stay current, to stay novel, to stay interesting, to be relevant? For one thing, you're going to need to co-create with the customer, and that's very frightening because you can't control what the customer is going to say or do. Social media spending is going to stay down because you can do it much more inexpensively. But studies prove that whatever you're spending there is pretty winning. Businesses, including Avaya, Cisco, Samsung, and Uniqlo, the fashion company, are really turning to social to generate demand both in the B2B and the B2C space. And many of these are developing job roles and departments around social media. I would argue that the hottest job title to have right now, if you're in your 20s or 30s, is to be the community manager. The community management title in the social media space is the person who's really going to be both a CRM person, they're going to be the public relations manager, because we're not going to be paying to issue press releases in the future. We're going to be spreading the word community member to community member. And community manager is going to be the job to have in the near future. A new study reveals that people who like a brand's Facebook page are more likely to buy or plan to buy from its products. Other data shows that social is the fastest growing company budget area. So brands like IBM and Ford, for example, are deploying the vast majority of their digital spend into social, while the rest of their digital brands are really moving more and more into the social space. These corporate peers are now going to drive everybody else there. If you're responsible for a digital budget, it's going to end up being called a social budget. I'm going to argue that the blurring between the words digital and social is about to begin. You're not going to be able to know what the difference is in another 18 months. When companies get it wrong, they get it terribly wrong. Look what happened to the Gap. The Gap went out there, they put it out there that they had this new logo. They didn't do their homework properly. They didn't seed it into the social space. They didn't have community management set up. They underestimated the power of it. It turned into a colossal failure. YouTube managed to pull it down for them with lots and lots of bad coverage. And for the Gap, there was a lot of egg on their face at a time when they needed to be perceived as very socially relevant. Okay, so where are we right now? Social is really making more of us addicts with new kinds of dependencies. We're becoming tech dependent. We're becoming constant stimulation dependent. We can't really be alone. But we're not alone with other people. We're alone with our devices, looking for ways to be happy. Teens are texting too much, but it's not just adolescents that are texting too much. It's that we are all texting too much.
We're texting while we're driving. Legislation is going to change because that is going to become a more dangerous pursuit than drunk driving. And we're going to see all kinds of legislation changing about driving and texting. There's going to be a lot of other questionable so-me behaviors. Sexting right now, sending naked pictures, is a huge social issue in high schools in the US. And I think you're going to see a lot of other things really come under a lot of legislative concerns. Also, as our brains are becoming rewired to this constant batter of information, we are becoming much more susceptible to developing truly addictive need for this stuff. Some people just can't turn it off. We're learning to sleep less. Many people cannot sleep unless they're in the same room as whatever device is bringing them this messaging. And I think we're going to see more and more, we'll see a great market for sleep products. And we're going to see more and more people talking about this. So if you're going to be in the business of selling people things that keep them constantly stimulated by social, you have to have a crisis plan in place to defend yourself from being perceived as driving them towards this addiction. Cyberbullying is going to become a bigger and bigger problem, and it's going to be a problem at all levels of society. There's been a bunch of suicides that are blamed on cyberbullying, and by that I mean the kinds of horrible, nasty commentary that people post about other people, typically anonymously. Bad net behavior is going to be a big issue. It's going to be a big issue in the human resources area. It's going to be a big issue for brands, that kind of mob behavior that turns against a brand. We're going to need to, as corporate people, teach our employees to have thicker skin. As parents, we're going to need to teach our kids to have thicker skin, to be able to tolerate more negativity. But there's going to be more than that. We've recently seen in the U.S. A young man throw himself off the George Washington Bridge after he posted online looking for advice because other students were streaming over live video, he and another boy having sex. We're going to need to recognize that all kinds of things are going to be going on online, and this cyberbullying is going to have to stop. It's going to also happen to brands. Recently, there was a case at United Airlines where they lost some luggage, and while losing luggage is never nice, thousands and thousands of people turned on them. You saw it happen in the UK with problems in relation to the opening of the new terminal, and again, thousands and thousands of people took to social media to turn on British Airways. And I think we're going to need to be very, very conscious of having crisis plans in place to manage the cyber bullies. It's not to say that when we're wrong, we're also not going to have to go into the social space and be apologetic. It's going to come down to putting money into programming that teach people proper cyber and social etiquette. It's a whole new world. We're going to have to teach people how to think this way and be communicative this way and learn how to be apologetic this way. One thing that's going to be incredibly important is the anonymity, I believe, is going to devolve. People are not going to tolerate anonymous or artificial handles much longer. People are going to tolerate negativity as long as it's signed with people's real names, and I think this is going to be a global movement that is going to come forward. People are going to really look to people to stand up and say, I don't like this, I won't tolerate it, I'm very, very angry, but if you sign your real name, I think that movement is coming next. I think it's going to be brand-driven and media-driven. Say anything you have to say, but put your name, put who you are behind your point of view. Lastly, a group of students in South Korea have come up with a pretty interesting approach. They're actually starting a political kindness movement, and they are really going out there full force